back to Audrey's Kitchen, where I'm going to show you how to make fresh, healthy, and delicious veggie-centric recipes. Today, we're going to make an asparagus, quinoa, and spicy pumpkin seed salad. Today I chose one of the vegetables that is the first to pop up in spring, asparagus. It comes in so many different colors. The most common is probably green that you see, but you can also find purple and white asparagus. Not only is asparagus high in antioxidants, which slows the aging process, it's also extremely high in folate, which acts as an anti-inflammatory in your body. Another benefit of asparagus is that it fights cancer and helps protect against it due to flushing out all the carcinogens in your body. Quinoa is kind of known as a wonder grain right now, and for a good reason. It's one of the only grains that is a complete protein. It contains all 9 essential amino acids. Next up, we have pumpkin seeds. Not only are they crunchy and delicious, but they have really high levels of zinc and magnesium. This helps us protect against osteoporosis, which is something that all of us need. In addition to the asparagus, quinoa, and pumpkin seeds, we're also going to add a few other ingredients. We're going to add some pea shoots, which are in season right now at the farmer's market, some avocado, and we're going to make a dressing out of shallot, whole grain mustard, some apple cider vinegar, and a little bit of honey. Alright, well, let's get started. The first thing we're going to want to do is turn on our oven. We're going to roast the asparagus and the pumpkin seeds at 375 degrees. So let's turn that on. Alright, now that we have that going, we're going to start with the quinoa. The important thing to remember about quinoa is that you always need to either soak it or rinse it really well. This is because it contains an outer husk on it that's kind of bitter and a little bit poisonous if you don't wash it off. So since we haven't soaked ours, I'm going to rinse it under warm water for about a minute. So we're going to start with 1 cup of quinoa. We're just going to pour it into a strainer and run it under hot water for about 2 minutes. Add 1 1/4 cup of cold water. So now that we've rinsed our quinoa and added our water to it, we're going to bring it to a boil. This will only take a minute or 2, so keep an eye on it because you don't want all the water to boil out. Once the quinoa and water are boiling together, you're going to reduce the heat to low and then put the lid on it and simmer it for about 20 minutes. So now that we have that boiling, the heat turned down, and the lid on, we're going to move on to some of our next ingredients. Namely asparagus, the star of the show. Asparagus is an ingredient that it took me a really long time to like, and it wasn't until I moved back to Colorado and my sister became completely obsessed with it that I really grew to appreciate it. She was literally putting it in everything that she ate. Maybe twice, 3 times a day, you name it, there was asparagus. So I learned to love asparagus out of default. Now with asparagus, if you're not familiar, you might think that you can just eat the whole thing, toss it with olive oil and roast it, but that's not the case. What you need to do is you need to break it in a certain point because the bottom part is very fibrous and tough and doesn't taste very good to eat. So how you tell what part you can eat and what not is you just simply hold it by both ends, and where it snaps is where it's good. So we're going to use this part, and this is for compost. If you're in a time crunch, you can simply break one of them, line them all up, and cut them in the same spot. But I think that each piece of asparagus is different, so I like to do them individually. You can also grab a few at a time. Break them like that. We're going to cut them into sections of about 1 inch on a bias cut. So I like to take a few at a time, put them in a bunch, keeping your knuckles in, and you're just going to cut it on an angle. That's a bias cut. You can see how it's cut like that. And if they're not perfect, that's fine. Now that that's done, we're going to put it all on our baking sheet. Drizzle a little bit of olive oil, about 1 tablespoon or 2, and sprinkle it with a little bit of sea salt. Give it a good toss, make sure everything's coated nicely, and spread it out evenly. You want it all to be touched, you don't want it overlapping because you want the surface area to be evenly distributed. Now that we have our asparagus all laid out, we're going to toss it in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes at 375 on the middle rack. Now that we have our asparagus and quinoa going, we're going to move on to our pumpkin seeds. For the pumpkin seeds, we're going to toast about 1/2 cup of them with a little bit of olive oil, salt, and chili powder. So we're going to put it in. We're going to add about a teaspoon or 2 of olive oil, just so that it gets it a little damp. And we're gonna sprinkle some chili powder and some sea salt on top. Just make it a little bit spicy. Depending on how spicy you want it, you can add more or less of the chili. I like it spicy, so. Now we're just gonna do the same. Toss it together. Pumpkin seeds burn really easily, so we really want to keep an eye on them. We probably just want them in there for 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how hot your oven is. And since we're roasting our asparagus at 375 degrees, I'm just gonna throw them on the top rack in there as well. If you don't have a timer on hand, a good technique is that if you have music playing in the background, just listen for the song to start and end, and that's about 2 to 3 minutes. So check them, and then if they're not done, go back for one more song. Our next ingredient is pea shoots. These are actually some of my favorite grains. They're literally the greens off of like sugar snap peas, and you wouldn't think by just looking at them, but they taste very similar to them. So they add good body, they're really good crunch, you can see, and very pretty to look at. We're just gonna give it a rinse and then set it aside until the rest of our ingredients are ready to go. Now that we have all of our ingredients cooking and roasting, we're gonna start making our dressing. For the dressing today, we're gonna do a whole grain mustard honey vinaigrette. 1 large shallot. So just cut it on both ends, peel it, just cut it in like chunks. Toss it in the blender. Now if you don't have a blender on hand, you can just mince it really finely and whisk all the ingredients together. Now we're gonna measure out 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar, 1/4 cup of cold water, 2 tablespoons of whole grain mustard, 2 tablespoons of honey. I like to use local honey because it acts as an anti-allergen. I also think it has a better flavor. And we're just gonna add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt just to bring out those flavors. We're gonna blend this up, and then at the end we're gonna drizzle in a tablespoon of olive oil. And drizzle it in. If you don't do it slowly, it'll just separate instead of emulsify when you're doing it. Alright, give it one good blend. That should be good to go. Let's give it a taste. Perfect. Now that we have our dressing, we're just gonna set it aside. We can stick it in the fridge to get it a little bit cooler. Now we're ready to check our quinoa. It's been 20 minutes. As you can see, it's fluffed up quite a bit. It's doubled in size. We're just gonna give it a stir and then keep some of that steam in and let it cool down in here for about 5 minutes. So as you can see, it's starting to blister, but it's still firm to the touch. So we're just gonna set this aside and wait for it to cool. Now that all of our ingredients are cooled and ready to go, we're gonna assemble our salad. First, we're gonna take our pea shoots. I like to just tear them into little pieces so that when you chop them up, they don't get all bruised. So we're just gonna break them in small pieces, put them at the base of our salad. Next, we're gonna take our quinoa that has been cooled, grab our asparagus. After the asparagus, we're gonna add about 3/4 of our dressing and then toss it together. We wanna do this first because we don't want the avocado and the pumpkin seeds to just kind of smash together and get all mushy in there. Alright, now that everything's nicely coated, we're gonna grab our avocado, cut it in half, just cut it in chunks. Careful not to cut through the avocado and cut your palm. Just pop it out. We're gonna add our pumpkin seeds. And now the last quart of our dressing. If you think there's already enough, you like kind of a light vinaigrette, then just keep it as it is and toss it all together. And there you go, it's ready to eat. There's our salad. Asparagus, quinoa, pumpkin seeds. It's the perfect summer salad. You can make it the night before, take it on picnics, or even for a great lunch. So try out the recipe and enjoy. And join me again next time on Audrey's Kitchen.